The last chapters comprise one detailed vision, and I won't go into it because I've been talking for way too long. Basically, they talk about the foreshadowing of the Antichrist. It looks at the history of the Ptolemies and the Seleucids and their wars. Chapter 11 goes into that in great detail. There's amazing detail looking at those two dynasties fighting backwards and forwards. Eventually the Romans become involved. And this man, Antiochus, is the perfect foreshadowing of the future ruler. The future ruler is mentioned by Daniel. If you turn to Daniel chapter 11, verse 36. And the king shall do as he wills. And this is not Antiochus Epiphanes, because Antiochus could not do what he wills because the Romans told him basically what to do. They told him to get out of Egypt. So Daniel here is speaking of someone that will come in the future. This man who will do as he wants. He will exalt himself and magnify himself above every god, and shall speak astonishing things against the God of gods. He shall prosper till the indignation is accomplished. For what is decreed shall be done. He shall pay no attention to the God of his fathers, or to the one beloved by women. And he shall not pay attention to any other God, for he shall magnify himself above all. He shall honor the God of fortresses instead of these, a God whom his fathers did not know. He shall honor with gold and silver and precious stones and costly gifts. He shall deal with the strongest fortresses and with the help of a foreign God. Those who acknowledge him he shall load with honor, and he shall make them rulers over many, and he shall divide the land for a price. That's speaking of this man that will come, that Jesus warns Israel to be attentive to. This man that will come and exalt himself up and present himself as God, as the God of all gods. And it's a foreshadowing, it's a prophetic epilogue. It speaks of a time in the future when these things will be accomplished. Finally, the last thing that I think we can take away from this is, well, interestingly, in chapter 12, Daniel speaks of the resurrection, the great hope. Daniel chapter 12 says, "At that time shall arise Michael, the great prince, who is in charge of your people, and there shall be a time of trouble such as never has been, or since there was a nation at that time. But all that time your people shall be delivered. But at that time your people shall be delivered. Everyone whose name shall be found written in the book. And many of those who are asleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, some to shame and everlasting contempt. And those who are wise shall shine like brightness of the sky above, and those who turn many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. But you, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end." It's amazing that the finale speaks of the future resurrection as something that was taught by Christ. It was something that was taught by the early church. It's something that we endorse. The resurrection of the dead at the end, some to everlasting righteousness, some to judgment. That's a truth that Daniel taught in the Old Testament. It's something that was taught in the New Testament. And finally, God really just, I think, uses a beautiful imagery of the people that turn many to righteousness will be like the stars forever and ever. Speaking of a glory, really, in the life that is led in serving God and turning people to God. And that is what Daniel's legacy really was about. In chapter 2, he was promoted to the chief of all the Magi, a position that normally would have been unheard of. Anyone that wasn't of the Medes, of a race that was the Medes. But Daniel, as a Jew, was appointed to that position, and that's a glorious thing when you can influence people for good, when you can influence people for God, when you can live your life in such a way that it turns many to righteousness, not against God but to God. And it's beautiful because when you skip forward into the period when the Christ was going to come, when Matthew is writing his gospel, he writes of wise men, Magi, coming from the east, looking for the one who was born King of the Jews. I mean, how else would the Magi know of these things if it wasn't for the testimony of the chief Magi, the Jew called Daniel, who turned many to righteousness? And as they came following the star, looking for him that was born King of the Jews, it just echoes this, that his legacy, the legacy of every Christian that lives a life that is, about sharing the gospel, about sharing your life, and in the hope of turning people to God and to righteousness, then your legacy is like the stars. It is like a glory. And Paul talks about this. He talks about the Thessalonian church. He says, what is our glory? It's you. You are our glory. You are guys that didn't know the true God, and through our ministry, praise God, you have come to Him. And that's our glory. And that is the glory for any Christian, is the life that is lived